Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome everyone to the Chax Chat podcast. My name is Chad Chelius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor and one of the accessibility wizards here at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am the other accessibility wizard here at Chax Training and Consulting. And if you want, Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you want your certification too, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org and click on certification from the top menu to get more information about that. Yeah, good stuff. Awesome. How you doing, Chad?
Doing well. Weather's nice here on the East Coast. It got a little warm this weekend, but overall the weather's been pretty nice. No air conditioner running and no heat's on. So it's like the perfect time of year.
Yeah, I've turned the air officially off. My bill was $700 last month. $700.
Oh, Dax.
Yeah. Well,
Dax.
We've got a lot of pets, the aquariums and all that other stuff. But yeah, we looked at solar, but solar is not going to make a difference. It's 10 years before we even break even. And even then it only, it would take another 10 years for it really to be a big savings. So the loan for the system we would need equals the money we're paying for solar. So is what it is. Hey, today I want to talk about how structure tags tell the story of your PDF document. And what I mean by that, let me give it a little bit more preface, is that you and I feel like it's a scene out of the Matrix. Whenever we open up the tags tree in a PDF, we can look at it. And I just think of the scene in the Matrix where the guy is, I think it's, what's his name? Spike or whatever. The one guy is looking at the code on the screen and Neo comes up behind him and says, "Are you reading that?" He goes, "I don't even see the code anymore. I just see blonde, brunette, redhead." Right. That whole scene. You and I look at a PDF tags tree and we can tell so much about how they designed it, what they used, all the different things just by looking at the tags tree, right?
It's really the cliff notes, right? I always refer to it as the cliff notes because like just by looking at it, I can tell, oh, this came from InDesign, or oh, this came from Word, or this came from PowerPoint, right? Like, you know where it came from. And then like, as we dive a little bit deeper, I'm like, oh, they used a bunch of soft returns here, right? Because like whenever I see like 4 lines that are really like separate lines, but they're tagged as one paragraph, right? I'm like, they use soft returns there when they should have used a hard return, right? But yeah, I know what you're saying.
Well, and for me, when I see a bunch of figures at the end of the document, I'm like, oh, they didn't anchor any of their figures in their tables. So, it's.
Or, well, it could be 2 things there, Dax. It could either be they threaded all the text in their document and therefore all the figures ended up at the back at the very end.
Well, but if you threaded your frames in the document, but if you anchored your images in those threads, you're fine.
But right? I'm saying if you didn't anchor them, it would look exactly like what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So threaded or not threaded, either way, you'll end up, if you don't anchor your figure tags, they're just going to end up all over the place. I tend to thread my documents. It's just the way I work and it just makes it easier for me. But I also know that that's not always the case for every document. And sometimes it's more work to thread stuff when you're just doing a simple layout that just happens to have quite a few boxes in it. So,
and that's interesting because I intentionally don't thread any of my content. Yeah. Because I think it gives me more control.
Sure. Different ways of doing things.
Yep.
It just depends. Yeah. See, because then I don't have to use the articles panel at all. If I know, like I use Made to Tag. I love Made to Tag. It's great for a lot of things. But if I don't need all the features that Made to Tag has, all I have to do is start with the simple document, thread it. I know that, I don't have any tables in it. Maybe I've got some images with some alt text and some basic stuff. I can just make my document the way I would normally make it, save as PDF, interactive PDF, and off I go. And I didn't have to set the articles panel or the layers panel or any of that. I can just, export a PDF that's mostly accessible, right? So yeah, it just depends. So anyway, so all that to say, we're going to talk today about how what you do in the tags panel affects the user experience from a output standpoint, because you and I, we hear this a lot from first time remediators. Why do I have to do this? Or, the one I hear all the time is, I just spent 4 hours removing 200 span tags from my document. And for those of you who are also chuckling, right? If you did it using a program like CommonLook, it would take you 5 seconds to level up all those tags, right? But if you didn't, and you manually went in and removed all those span tags, you just spent a lot of unnecessary, I won't say wasted, but a lot of unnecessary time for no net benefit whatsoever to the end user.
Yeah, like truly no benefit from a screen reader user experience, right? Because it's not like those span tags are voiced, right? So I always think of span tags and container tags are like the top level and the bottom level of the tag structure, right? And the container tags are not voiced and the span tags are not voiced. So even though they may drive you crazy if you have OCD, right? It kind of like messes up the tag structure or whatever. It doesn't have a darn effect at all on the experience to the end user.
Well, something that does though, is we often hear, my list that came out of Word has the bullet inside the LI tag. So a list structure is LI, that's for list item. And then LBL for the list bullet, right? For the label.
Or the label,
Right, that's what it is, label, because it could be a number, right? And then the L body for the body of the bullet, or the reference. But what we know, because we've done some testing, that using assistive technology, if everything is just in the LI, because we tell people, hey, the easiest, most simple form of a valid list is LI. And everything can go in the LI. You don't need the L body. You don't need the label. It can just be in the LI and it's voiced, which is not incorrect. But what happens is the screen reader will read right through every single one of those list items, just as if it were reading paragraph text. It'll say bullet, blah, 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 bullet, blah, 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 bullet, blah, blah, blah. And it won't stop at each list item to allow the user to then move to the next one, or pause at the end of each list item if you're in continuous reading order. So the only way to get it to stop and give that user that extra control is to make sure that your bullet or your character in the beginning, your number or bullet, is in the LBL and your body text is in the L body.
Can that be fixed in CommonLook? Like, is there a way to like search for a bullet character and wrap it in a label tag?
No, but what you can do is you can just draw a box around your list and there's a one button list tool. The problem with that though is it's hit or miss. If you have a lot of leading in your paragraph, line to line, there's a lot of space. Sometimes it will try to make another bullet out of what is the line wrap of one long bullet. So instead of having 4 bullets that are maybe span 5 or 6 lines, it'll give you 5 or 6.
Like, are you saying like if the leading within the bullet itself is pretty big,
right,
it'll break it into a separate item or try to break it into a separate item? Yeah.
Right. If a bullet wraps 2 lines, we can visually see the bullet lines up with line 1, and that the second line that it wrapped to is just the continuation of that bullet. CommonLook sometimes will tag it as a separate bullet, and that's unfortunate. So then what I do is I go in and I just do each one as a LI, and then I add the wrapping L tag around it, and then kind of work backward that way.
You have to kind of work around that limitation.
Exactly.
For everybody's reference, PDFix also has very similar functionality to that. So I can literally just marquee the whole list and say tag as list.
Right.
And it literally breaks the bullet into a label, the text into an L body, and really does a pretty tremendous job. So, you know, and that's a case where, like, you know, people always ask us, what tool do you use? All of them, right? I mean, it's really what it comes down to.
Anyone I can get my hands on.
Because as much as I love axesPDF, axesPDF can't tag anything.
Right.
axesPDF can only deal with the tags that you give it. And you could change a tag, but you can't highlight a list and say tag it as a list. It doesn't have that capability.
Well, the other thing I don't like about, and this is not to bag on axesPDF, because if anybody is a champion for axesPDF, it's me. I love that freaking complex table editor inside there. The other things I love are the ability to edit the font map. Does PDFix have the ability to edit the font map?
I don't know the answer to that.
No worries.
I'll have to look into that. Yeah.
And then it's the only axesPDF is the only one I know of that allows editing the font map. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then there is set placement. You can one-click set placement. Rebuild structural parent tree, which is a big one, right? There are other things I can't think of right now, but there's some really major ones that I really like.
Well, one that I love that I wish Acrobat had is the command is called delete upmost tag. It basically means delete the parent tag and let all the children come up and take its place.
See, in CommonLook calls that level up. So in CommonLook, all I have to do is say Control P or Control Shift P to level up the children or just remove from the parent. So that's a great feature. What I do not prefer about axesPDF is how when you move, you drag a tag one way, one direction or another, that it's really dependent on that little arrow that pops up, whether it's a blue little scoopy arrow or a green straight arrow, or I can never get it to drop in the right place. And a lot of times what I end up having to do is drop it under the item I really want it to be in front of, and then take that item and push it down. Like, it's good for putting things at the end of things, but I just struggle with trying to get something to come in above the tag that I'm at.
I think you just need to shift into patient user mode, because I think it's really just a matter. I don't have a problem with that.
Sure.
Right. Because I do that a lot too. Great example, like InDesign's notorious. When you output a table that spans multiple pages, you end up with like 3 or 4 T bodies.
Right.
Right. Now, it's technically not a problem, but it's one of those cases where my OCD kicks in and I'm like, we should only have 1 T body. And so I'll grab all the rows from those other bodies and just drag it up there and drop it on there. And it's cool because it just drops it to the end of that list and combines them all. So I really enjoy that feature.
With CommonLook, you just select the 3 L bodies, say Control M, merges all 3, puts them all in order, done.
Yeah.
So I just don't like moving things around inside axesPDF. I think it does a lot of other things really well, but CommonLook, hold down the Control and Shift key and use the arrows, and it's just such a dream to just in scale move things up or down the tags tree. It makes it so much saving of time being able to do that.
And I'll tell you, Axis 4, if you guys are listening, a merge command would be super helpful.
Yep.
Right. Like, I'd really like that. Like, if I could grab 3 L bodies and say, just merge them, right? Merge them all into one. That'd be cool.
Yep. Awesome. So we kind of got off on a tangent there. I apologize, but we're talking about the things that you do to the tags tree that may not necessarily have a positive effect, or you waste time or spend time doing something that has no net effect to the end user, or that might actually create a bad user experience. And so we were talking about lists and list items is kind of where we went off on the tangent, and that a full complete list allows the user to move independently one at a time from list item to list item. But naturally, in normal reading mode, a basic list, which is just the L and LI, while correct, does not stop. It just reads through every one of those bullets. So if you're going for the good, better, best, then you want to have a full formal list. I don't think it's a super barrier, but definitely it is a reason to defend the idea of having a properly semantic list, right?
Because I think it's important to kind of just let our audience know, like when you're reading that list, it's not like you could pause in the middle of that process. Like you hear a couple and you say, oh, hold on, let me process that. Right. And then say, okay, keep going. That's not a thing, right? Yeah. You either read it all or you read none of it, and that's your option.
Of course, you can use keys to go back word by word or go back line by line, but that's not the same thing as if it were a formally semantic list. You just press a down arrow and it moves to the next list item. You move the up arrow to the next list up, the previous list item. So good stuff. The other thing that we find is the use of the title tag. Right. And this is one that I know some people listening to this podcast are not going to agree with us, and that's okay. But the title tag, while PDF UA specific, it's compliant, it is a formal tag for PDF. It is not recognized yet by JAWS or NVDA consistently. And therefore it just gets read as a regular paragraph. And so you and I both would advocate for the use of a heading level 1 tag, where the title of a document is being listed. And I see people do both. They'll go in and change the title tag to the H1, which I would probably do because I think it violates info and relationships from a screen reader user standpoint. It is the title of the document and it is a heading on the page. Therefore, it should be a heading in the tag string. And then I see other people do the opposite. They'll change the H1 to a title tag and they'll stamp their foot and say the title tag is the correct tag, and it's up to JAWS and NVDA to fix their software if they want the end user to hear it right. And yeah, I'll let you speak on that.
Well, and that's fine, but the one who's suffering is the end user, right? Like you know, it's like you could stand on your soapbox all day and scream to the gods that the title tag should be the paramount tag or the top level tag. But if it doesn't read correctly, there's only one person, not one person, but one group of people who are suffering. And those are the users of assistive technology. So for that reason, you and I always err on the side of the user.
Well, and I think of why we do what we do. The whole reason we have a job is to benefit the end user. It's not to make perfect code. I don't care about the code. The code helps me get there. It definitely gives me a standard to adhere to or to strive for. But what I'm trying to do is make it so that when the person opens a document, they get an equitable user experience compared to a sighted person, period.
Yeah.
Right.
Interestingly enough, in Word, if you use the title style, it maps to an H1.
Now it does. Based on conversation I had with Clint Covington.
With Clint,
his team. Yeah. So good stuff there. But if you have older documents that are mapped to a title and you open them, it's still mapped to the P tag. So,
and it's going to be annoying if JAWS and NVDA ever decide, okay, we're going to recognize the title tag as an important tag. And I guess the question becomes like, I guess what we're asking is that the title tag be voiced as title.
Agreed. If I could reach into JAWS and NVDA and program my own thing, I would make it say title.
So it would say like 2025 annual report title, right? It would literally voice that. And so the annoying thing is, like, if JAWS and NVDA ever decide to implement that, well, now Word is kind of like antiquated because they're still mapping the title to an H1, right? And then they would have to update that.
An average user would hear heading level 1, 2024 report.
Which is fine.
And that would make perfect sense. There's no barrier whether it says title or heading level 1. If it says heading level 2, which it actually does say currently in JAWS, one of them says heading level 2, then, or actually that's for the H tag. The H tag gets voiced as heading level 2 in one software, but nothing in the other software. So when it's wrong, I agree with you. but when it's still not a barrier, I'm okay.
I just thought of something though. You could probably fix it very easily by simply deleting the role map that's in the document. So there's going to be a role map that goes title to H1. And if you delete that role map, now title is going to be title.
Agreed. So what we're talking about here is in the tags tree, when you export directly from Word or InDesign or any other program, there is the style you made something. You can call it Dax's blue heading, but it's mapped to an H2, right? And that map is called a role map. And it's a hidden little lookup table that sits inside your document, inside the PDF that you can access by going to any tag in the tags tree, right-clicking and saying view, edit role map, and it'll bring the role map up. However, I use CommonLook. And CommonLook does not allow you to see the tags tree using the standard tags while maintaining the role map. When you look at the tags tree, if a role map exists, your tags all say the role map name. So you're going to see Dax's heading level 1 and basic body paragraph, et cetera, et cetera. You do not see heading level 1, heading level 2, P.
In what situation?
In every situation, if you open up a document in CommonLook, it will always read whatever your role map, whatever your not role map is, whatever the standard tag is in the tags tree. And I can't edit that way. I want to see the role map. So what you have to do is you have to, what they call, it's delete role map. And so when you delete the role map, you're not really deleting it. You're actually applying it. You're saying, here's what the role map says. Now force all my tags to say this. And so it removes the role map and manually burns in the name of whatever that style is. So in the case of the documents you were just talking about, if I didn't edit in CommonLook and I just left it as is, then yeah, it's a matter of opening the PDF, removing that element in the role map. We do this with caption all the time. InDesign exports caption. It gets role map to a P tag or something else. You just delete it out of the role map and it's fine. But if I edit in CommonLook, I always remove the role map because it's just part of the workflow. And when you do that, now it's an H1. There's no remnant of what it was before that.
Can you edit the role map in CommonLook?
Oh yeah, you can.
Oh, you can. So you can modify that if you wanted to.
Yeah, just like you can in a PDF, but it doesn't allow you to see the tag structure that's in the tags tree in any other format other than
non-role mapped.
Non-role map. It's so annoying. I wish CommonLook, if you're listening, just give me the ability to toggle that back on and off. I don't.
It's a checkbox, right? It should just be a checkbox, you know?
Yeah. Well, so
cool.
So, go ahead, Chad. Go ahead.
So let's talk about. So we were talking about lists, right?
Yep.
And, one of the things you and I were talking about a little bit earlier was the idea of a list with one item.
Oh, the pair of socks.
When you create a document, you'll often have a style that applies bullets or even a custom bullet to a list of items, right?
Yep.
And the problem with that is that sometimes you only have one of those items.
Yep.
And so a list with one item, what it's going to do is it's going to say list with one item.
Right.
And, you and I say this all the time, Dax, a list with one item is not a list, right? It's just an item, and you always say it's like having, what do you say? One sock?
It's a pair of sock.
A pair of sock. Okay.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing, right? So I was working on a handout for a class I'm teaching, and that came up. I was literally working on the outline of it, and I'm like, wow, okay. In this outline, I only have one item, and I'm going to share screen here, right, to show you what I'm talking about. So for those of you not watching us on YouTube, how dare you? Go watch us on YouTube. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can get more followers. We're trying to hit 1,000. But if you're just listening, on screen, we have a main paragraph that says accessibility concepts. And there's I don't know, 8 bullets there talking about where to start and headings and contrast and all this stuff. And then there's some subtopics: Illustrator tools, Photoshop tools, Bridge, InDesign, Acrobat, and assistive technology. Well, in all of the lists, the sublists there's 3 to 5 items except for Adobe Bridge and assistive technology. For Adobe Bridge, it just says metadata, and there's 1 bullet. And then assistive technology just says Apple VoiceOver. This happens to be a class for a Mac. So I only have 1 bullet item, and it pained me to have to put that in there as a bullet because everything in my brain says there's no such thing as a list with 1 item. But here, Chad, very clearly, it is a list with 1 item. And it would look weird if all the others had list bullets and these 2 paragraphs didn't. Right?
Yeah, it would. And this is another thing you and I were talking about, right? Because in the PDF remediation world, there's really 2 main categories of workflow, right? Mm-hmm. There's one workflow where here's a PDF, make it accessible.
Right.
And then the other workflow is here's the source document that you can then make a PDF from. Right.
Right. You're either the designer or someone else designed it and they gave it to you.
Exactly. And so, you could fix that problem if you wanted to. In your case, you were in InDesign. You could have duplicated that style and then mapped that style to a P tag.
But here's the thing, though, Chad. If I'm hearing heading level 2, Illustrator tool, Adobe Illustrator tools, list 7 items. And then I hear those 7 items. Heading level 2, Photoshop tools, list 3 items. And I hear those 3 items. Then I hear heading level 2, Bridge, metadata. Right? I just heard list, heading list. It's a consistent user experience. I would think that the average person would go, oh, well, why wasn't that one a list when the others were a list? Here's what I figured out about this whole conundrum. If I have a paragraph and I have a list, I got a normal paragraph, and underneath the paragraph, I've got a list. And the list just happens to have 1 item in it. That's stupid. I don't think you should do that. But if I've got a whole page full of list categories where each of them may have a varying number of list items, I think it's acceptable to have a list with 1 item only in that case.
I don't disagree with you, especially in the situation you're talking about of creating a consistent user experience, right? So, I think you explained it perfectly, right? Like when you've got a sequence of items and it's heading list, I totally agree with you. If one of those lists has 1 item in it, I don't think I'm gonna ring the bell or cause a scene about that or anything like that. But if it's within flowing text and you only have like 1 instance where there's 1 bullet, I think in that case I would rather have it just read as a paragraph than a list of 1 item. Right.
I think we are in sync. I think we are agreed. Yeah. But you brought up another thing, I think, in between all this that I think we need to talk about. And I want everybody, if you're driving, just pay attention to the road still. But everybody else, listen intently here, because I'm about to drop something that I think is maybe a little controversial. It is not your job to figure out what is a better user experience. It is your job to tag what is there until it becomes a barrier, right? I see so many people that are like, oh, well, this is a list, but I think it should be headings. And so they spend all this time breaking it apart. It was a list. It was properly tagged, but you changed it now to be something else because you think it's a better user experience.
And I will tell you, we as sighted users often let our opinions make that decision for us, right?
Agreed, like, because it's an opinion.
Exactly. But like we as a sighted person have this notion of what the experience should be, when in reality, we should be putting ourselves in the shoes of somebody using assistive technology and then saying, what would the better user experience be?
Well, see, and that's why I use assistive technology every single day. I think this is where you and I are a little different in that. I don't consider myself not an assistive technology user. I don't consider myself a sighted user. I consider myself an avid user of assistive technology on a daily basis. Am I using it to operate and do everything that I need to do in my life? Absolutely not. Would I compare myself equally to someone who has no sight, who uses JAWS and NVDA to consume their digital world? No, that's not a fair comparison. But I think as people who do remediation, if you are not listening to your document using assistive technology, you really are missing a big portion of what it means to do the job you're doing, to understand that user experience, to know what that's like. So exactly what you just said, Chad, that when it comes to what do I decide to do I do it this way or do I do it that way? You have context, because that will help you decide which decision is a better one for the end user and not just my own opinion of what that is.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not exactly sure what you were saying about where you and I are different, because I use assistive technology every day as well. And because of that, I'm able to make better decisions about what the better user experience is going to be.
Well, I think just to clarify what I heard was, I heard that, well, I'm a sighted user, so my opinion of what I think is a good user experience for the assistive technology user is tainted because I'm sighted, and therefore I'm looking at it from a sighted perspective. And so I'm really not uniquely qualified or qualified enough to make that decision for them and be correct.
I was generalizing, Dax.
Okay.
But like, I think you and I are not the typical people. Right.
Sure,
like
sure.
You and I because we do this day in and day out, right? Like we have a very different perspective, but
yep.
I teach people all the time.
Right.
And so often I hear people ask questions, and they're valid questions, but they're coming from the point of a sighted user, right? So
sure.
I was in a class the other day and I was reading a document for the viewers, for the attendees, so they could understand, the experience. And then one woman said, "Boy, that voice is really annoying to me."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, keep in mind, you're making that decision based on the fact that you're a sighted person."
Okay.
Somebody who's non-sighted can only consume this content with the help of assistive technology. So when you say like, "Oh, that's annoying," to somebody who has no other way of consuming that content, they don't really have as many options as you would.
Well, I will just say, JAWS has more than 75 languages and hundreds of voices. NVDA has many, many voices. In fact, I have 5 or 6, and I think you have several programmed into your NVDA, because I know you listen to some stuff in Spanish. So those voices can be changed. What happens is people most of the time, when people hear that annoying voice, they're hearing the NG speak, or the non-eloquence or one core voice of this assistive technology. And so when you don't have one of the eloquence voices or one of the one voice voices, and it sounds a lot more mechanical, but there are lots of voices. And what's really great about some text-to-speech engines, like not technically tag tree engines, but a lot of the schools are now adopting voices that are more familiar. There is one I can think of off the top of my head that actually you can program one of the voices that sounds like Snoop Dogg. And so as a reader of text, if I can understand and follow along better when someone is speaking in a way that is interesting or familiar, then I'm much more engaged. And so I think that's a wonderful thing to do, to have multiple voices and to really kind of meet people where they are, right? Because if I'm Spanish and my assistive technology voice has a Spanish accent, I'm much more likely to be able to understand that than a person who is English with an English accent, even though they're both reading English. So yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. So getting back to kind of what we were talking about is spending time changing something that isn't a barrier to a different user experience, changing a numbered list to a heading, to a set of headings because it has a paragraph in between, or maybe changing a table that really is reading left to right, top to bottom, but is a layout table because we don't want it in a table. Now, if there's a barrier, if the table reads incorrectly in the wrong natural reading order, or there's something wrong with how something is tagged, by all means, it's our duty to fix it. But if it's our opinion that it should be a different presentation than what it is, and we spend time fixing those things just because we want it to be a different user experience, I think that's outside of the scope of what we're really here to do.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with you. But I feel like the user experience is always something you should have in the back of your mind as you're building your content, right? Like we need to think about, okay, this is how this is going to be read. And there are some things that are very easy, right? Some things are very simple. It's like, okay, heading structure. One thing I will say, like one of the things you were talking about that made me think about this, Dax, is I will never tell anybody to go to the WCAG website and start memorizing WCAG success criteria.
Sure.
What I would tell you to do, though, if there's one of them that I think you need to pay particular attention to because it's a success criteria that we live and die by, and that is info and relationships. Is that 1.3.1?
Yep, correct.
1.3.1, info and relationships. If you follow info and relationships, half your job's done. Right? Like you've done a huge part of what accessibility is. And it's a very simple success criteria because it simply says tag content as what it is, right? If this guy here is a heading, then tag it as a heading. If this guy here is a list, tag it as a list, table, whatever it is. So it's a very simple success criteria, which is why I like it so much, but it's also incredibly important from a standpoint of making sure your document is as accessible as it can be.
Well, I think of the example, we see this a lot in documents where there is a numbered system, 1.0 main topic. And then the next paragraph's 2.0 overview. And the next one is 3.0 whatever. Then if they use a list tool inside their document, that's going to output as a list with several p tags. Most of the time it outputs as a list one item with p tags in between and then list one item over and over again, right? That's a poor user experience and it's a barrier and it's not complete, right? So if I were going to keep it as a list, I would then want to move every one of those paragraphs into the L body. I mean, there's a whole series of things that need to happen in order to maintain the integrity of list 26 items, right? Because that's how many items there are in those things. But it makes sense from a visual standpoint that 1.0 overview is tagged as a heading. Yeah, I'm going to go in and make that consistent user experience be tagged as a heading, right? But to simply make the personal decision to change something versus there being a barrier or not, I think is where the line becomes a little bit more clear for me, where I'm like, look, it's not a barrier. Yeah, it's probably not the way I would do it if I were creating this as a source file, but the end user is going to understand what's going on. I cannot spend 6 hours going through a 500-page document reorganizing heading structure because they used a numbered list in the heading, So I think it's balancing barrier versus time. We should always make time to fix a barrier. We may not always have time to make it a better user experience. And I think those two things are different.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Awesome. the last thing I want to talk about before we end the podcast, Chad, is tables. And this is one where I think that people aren't doing enough, where I don't think it's the opposite problem of them wasting time. I think they're not setting scope in their tables. And I just want to talk about why scope matters in your table. We know that Word does not currently set scope. It will identify a TH or, in your column or row headers. And if you say repeat rows across page or repeat heading across pages, it will assign scope to those column headers. But that's it. So if you have row headers in your document and you export from Word, you always have to set the scope to row. It's not set correctly. And in InDesign, you can't set scope at all. It just sets the TH and that's it. So let's talk a bit about why scope is important.
Well, in a table, you and I often say, right, at the bare minimum, your table should have what we call a column header, right? And that's when like the first row of the table is a header at the top of every column in the table, right? Your table could also have a row header, and that would be like the leftmost column, the cells in the leftmost column going across, basically from left to right in the table. So, the column headers go vertical, row headers go horizontally.
Sure.
But without more information, assistive technology can get a little confused, because it's like, oh, this is a header, but which direction am I supposed to acknowledge that header in, right? And that's where scope comes into play. So scope can have a value of column, row, or both, right? Sure. And so when you apply scope, so in the case of the row at the top of a table, when you apply a scope to those headers, assistive technology understands that those are headers for the data going down in the table.
Right.
And in the case of the left column, when you apply a scope of row, it explains to the assistive technology that these are headers for the data going across. And without that information, assistive technology just gets a bit confused, to be honest, right?
Well, and I think it's not even so much as it gets confused. It just doesn't give you any extra data. So if you go to a cell within a table and you just hear 25, you're like, okay, 25 what? Well, you may not have remembered that the column header for that column you're in is potatoes, and that the whole table is in millions of pounds, and that the row header for that is Idaho, right? That information is important to know so that you hear potatoes, Idaho, 25 million, right? I mean, that's the whole point, is that it reads those headers according to the data and in where it is in the table. So scope, without scope, a table will always assume that the first row is a column header. So if you're like, well, Dax, I've never set scope before in my life. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. My tables sound just fine. Well, they may sound okay if you don't have any row headers and you only have one column header, because assistive technology assumes by default that your first row is a column header. So in that case, maybe you don't have to have scope, but in every other case, scope is the defining term that triggers the screen reader to voice either the label for the row or the label for the column.
Yeah. And that's incredibly important. The concept of repeating rows in a table, like on each page in which the table is threaded, is a benefit for sighted users. Right? Because when scope is properly applied in a table, you can be in row 150 and it still knows what header that data cell belongs to.
Agreed.
And so, to be honest, it's a great user experience, right? Because I know, Dax, I've been on a web page many, many times that had like a table of information, and you scroll down in the table to get to where you want to go, and then you can no longer see the header anymore.
Right.
And now you got to scroll all the way back up to the top and wait, what was that header row? Okay, there it is. And then you scroll all the way back down. It's not a great user experience,
Yeah. Well, and if you want more information about what makes a table accessible, in fact, we just released a couple weeks ago, season 5, episode 15, entitled What Makes a Table Accessible. So you can listen to our whole podcast all about that. So hopefully today we've given you a few tips. We kind of meandered off on a couple of side tangents, but that's not anything out of the ordinary for
Nothing
me.
New.
Nothing new. But hopefully you've gotten some good nuggets of wisdom out of this podcast. And we really look forward to seeing you at the next conference. Our next conference is going to be CSUN.
All right, everybody. Well, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you gained some valuable information from our discussion today. And my name's Chad Chelius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where every other week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.